Now, the most important day of the 2024 US elections is here.
Well, of course, in more than a dozen US states, people are out to vote for their presidential choice. And as we speak, polling has concluded in at least 8 states. Let's look at the latest developments coming in.
Polls that have now closed include the US states of Vermont, Virginia, North Carolina, Alabama and Massachusetts. Exit polls by CNN and CBS News claim that the US President Joe Biden has won the Democratic primaries in Virginia, Massachusetts, Maine and North Carolina. The same projections have also predicted similar fate for former President Donald Trump in the state of Virginia, Tennessee and Oklahoma.
The vote count is now coming in from several US states. Local media reports claim 24% of the votes have been counted in Texas, and Trump is leading with 74.1% of the vote. Trump is also leading at Vermont with 48.8% so far. In Vermont, Trump maintains a lead, but only by 1 vote. 33% of the vote have counted so far in the state, and in Maine, where 2% of the votes have been counted, Trump is leading with 74% so far. In Massachusetts, Trump's rival Nikki Haley is leading with 48.6%.
As more developments are kicking in, let's quickly also understand what Super Tuesday actually is and why the day has been dubbed as one of the most crucial days of the 2024 US election. Voters in 16 US states and 1 US territory are choosing their presidential candidate primaries. Later today, the fate of 1,439 Democratic and 874 Republican delegates will be decided. Overall, Biden has secured 206 delegates. So far, he needs a total of 1,968, and this is out of the 3,934 delegates to win.
1,421 delegates that represent roughly a third of all delegates are up for grabs. On the other hand, the former president is standing with 244 delegates right now. Trump needs a total of 1,215 of the total 2,429 delegates in the Republican primary. 874 delegates are up for grabs on Super Tuesday. The U.S. territory of American Samoa is simultaneously holding its Democratic caucus.
The Democratic Party in Iowa has announced that Joe Biden has won the Democratic caucus in the state. However, experts say only after the release of all votes, one can analyze the breakaway and how many people voted for uncommitted instead of Biden as a form of protest. A similar situation is panning out in the state of Michigan as well.
Meanwhile, Trump is looking to start the day with a commanding lead in the delegate count. However, the main question in the Republican side, of course, remains the survival of Trump's lone challenger in the presidential race. We're talking about Nikki Haley, who has won only one contest so far, the primary in Washington, D.C. Even though she is falling far behind in terms of delegates, Haley insists that Republicans deserve a second option.
Earlier, Haley's campaign sent out a last-minute fundraising email. The mail urged the people to step up with any amount that they can before the polls close.
Meanwhile, megastar Taylor Swift encouraged her millions of fans to vote in Super Tuesday primary contests across the US. However, the pop star did not endorse any specific candidate. Swift has more than 280 million followers on Instagram.
Now, for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani is joining us live from New York. Susan, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, to begin with, I want you to take us through the major wins and how do you assess how the presidential hopefuls are positioned in this race at this juncture?
Yeah, well, hey, you guys did a great job really breaking down the numbers, which is a lot to really digest at this point. But let's just look at the bigger picture. It looks like former President Donald Trump is on a path to clear victory and becoming the nominee for the Republican Party. And of course, Joe Biden as well. We are not expecting to hear from President Biden on the Democrat side or Nikki Haley, as you mentioned, Trump's main rival. But we will hear from the former president in a few hours from now. Remember, polls in California closed somewhere around 11 p.m. our time here on the East Coast. So there is some time. There is a watch party at Mar-a-Lago, and the former president is expected to speak. I think what's interesting to note at this point, it was expected that Donald Trump would really sweep away these delegates. But I think what's also more interesting is to see that Democrats are going in large numbers and voting for President Joe Biden. And this is despite the fact that we hear report after report that there's concern about his age. The Democrats are weary. They're looking for an alternative and whatnot. And I think that's just a cautionary tale, as we saw in the midterms, that we can't really 100% rely on polls when it comes to, contests like this.
Susan, a possible rematch, of course, you have briefly mentioned about it, but a possible rematch between, of course, Biden and Trump, that seems highly likely now, of course. But what can you tell us more about that, given the concerns that already exist regarding Biden?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that, it's really been a talking point, that the majority of Americans don't want this rematch. But then you have to look at the two different parties. Ultimately, who becomes the nominee, then both parties will really go and vote for their candidate. I think what will be very interesting is to see former President Donald Trump, what kind of speech he's going to give tonight. Is it going to be a speech that's trying to bring Haley supporters on his team? Is it going to be antagonistic, or is it going to focus on the general election like his previous speech? And this is really going to be telling moving forward. Some analysts believe that during a rematch between Trump and Biden, President Trump won't be able to win without Haley supporters. Others believe that the Republican Party has moved past the Republican that Haley is, which is very established and is a more populist party at this point. And the Republican Party doesn't need Haley supporters. So, those nuances are something to consider.
All right, Susan, we'll let you go for now. Of course, it's going to be a busy day ahead for you as well, as you're going to be tracking all those developments coming in. We'll be in touch for more updates. All right, that was Susan Tehrani from New York getting us all the updates. Our Voice of America correspondent Chris Casquet also spoke to various supports of the major candidates prior to the exit polls. Take a look.
Haley. I'm a registered Democrat.
Oh, so that's interesting. Can you tell us what
because I
behind it?
Want to do everything I can so that Trump is not president.
I voted for Donald Trump. He's basically the strongest candidate on the Republican side, and the last term he was in as the president, he produced results in terms of both foreign policy and economy.
The main contenders here are Biden and Trump, and when I'm looking at, the history of what both of those candidates have done, mostly for minority groups, I would support Trump in that, being a queer woman. I think Trump has said some very detrimental things to our community, and I have to go with the other option.